Let's continue.
Thank you, Chair. On pages 208 to 209, you deal with the... Did anyone ever say to the MEC, look, you know, that's really our job in the department. It's an operational matter. It's not a matter for an MEC. Was that issue ever raised?
Chair, it was supposed to be raised by the HOD.
But did he raise it?
Not as far as I know. Yes.
Well, he gave evidence yesterday, that is the HOD of the time, Mr. Mkwena, that there was a practice in the department which had gone for some time, that the MEC, whoever the MEC was at any particular point in time, would be the one who would pick the contractors who should be given contracts. Now, you were in the department for a long time. Do you know anything about such a practice?
When I joined the department, especially the housing part, projects were already running, but in preparation of the 2010-11, there was a list that was signed off by MEC, the then MEC Mafareka, which indicated that he had an input on it, and he approved it. Yes.
That is before Mr. Zwane.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, with Mr. Zwane, I saw in Mr. Mkhesi's affidavit where he is making reference to M14, which is the list of the contractors. At the bottom is the signature of Mr. Zwane and the date when it approved.
Or is that a document that you saw in the bundle here, or is that a document that's somewhere else?
No, it's in the bundle.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
As part of the annexures to his affidavit.
Oh, I didn't pick that up.
We'll look at that and
Okay.
perhaps find it in the next few minutes, please.
Okay.
You say it's attached to the affidavit of?
Of Mr. Mkhesi as, I think it's NM14.
Thank you very much. At the time the advance payment system was being implemented, we've been told that there were 3 sets of contracts. The first was the contract with the contractor, and we know what it said about who was responsible for sourcing supplies and paying the supplier in that contract, and when the department's obligation to pay the contractor would arise. We understand that. The second level of contract was the tripartite agreement, the building material supply agreement, which involved the supplier, the contractor, and the department. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
And the third was the so-called session agreement, where the claim for the payment for supplies was ceded by the contractor to the supplier. You recall that contract?
Correct.
And we know, of course, that that session was really not a valid or real session because the claim wasn't in existence at the time the session was signed. We know that.
Correct.
But interestingly, you say at paragraph 104.3 that all these contracts were signed at the same time.
Yes, Chair.
That's even more strange because you're signing a session agreement and a supply agreement which contradicts the contract agreement, and the session agreement, the session hasn't even arisen. Did these anomalies strike anybody?
Yeah, what happened, Chair, is that before contractors were appointed, there were briefing sessions in terms of what is going to be unfolding in terms of the advance payment system. The MEC led that briefing sessions. They were held district by district. To say to contractors, he met with the contractors first and said to them, guys, this is how we are going to move. You'll be signing contract, you have been allocated houses, this is how much you've been allocated, each contract. And then you are going to sign an agreement with the department. Because we are in a rush, we are going to sign a tripartite agreement with us and the material supplier that will be supplying you with the material. You will go and contact your own material supplier in your own space. For instance, if I was in Velcom, I'll go to the Velcom building material supplier, Coral Break or whoever, and say, look, give me a quotation. I want to go and sign this particular agreement. After those briefings, contractors were like streaming to the department to come and sign the first contract that allocates them work, the second contract tripartite, and the session agreement at the same time for this scheme to happen in any way. But I must also qualify, Chair, that all those particular instruments, the three instruments, were a product of the state legal advisors on the first floor, because they had an input into those particular contracts as legal gurus. Ours was to give them the technical thinking in terms of the quantities that will be there, and the technical, what we normally call bill of quantities as to what we need to see in the house. And they will draft the contract and bounce them amongst themselves and finalize them. Because that was the instruction that came from a cabinet to say no projects will happen in the department besides the department bouncing all those particular contracts with the fourth floor. The fourth floor being the Premier's office in the Free State.
Well, there's evidence that these contracts didn't get there. There's contradictory evidence that these contracts did get there. But that's Mr. Fenter's office.
Yeah, that's Mr. Fenter's office.
Well, there's evidence that these contracts never got to him.
As the chairperson, I would like you to go maybe look at the transcript of our disciplinary hearing. There was somebody that testified, a lady, I happen to have forgotten her name, from the office of Mr. Fenter, who came and testified on those particular contracts.
Well, we'll deal with that evidence, but they ought to have gone there for vetting.
Yes.
And any lawyer who looked at this mess of contracts would have concluded that they cannot all sit together. And the explanation you've given that there was a briefing session only makes it worse, because you have a verbal briefing session explaining one thing, and you have three contracts that cannot live together explaining another system. It doesn't help to have a briefing session where you give a verbal explanation to contractors and suppliers how things are going to work, and then you have a written signed contract which appears to be completely contradictory, and none of these contracts can live with one another. It's just an unacceptable mess, surely.
I agree with you, Chairperson.
Then let's go to paragraphs 105, 6, and 7. Basically, as I understand it, this collection of contracts, the written contracts are used to justify payments, not the verbal side agreements.
Correct?
Paragraph 110, what do you say there? Sorry, well, perhaps we better place on record what you say in paragraph 109, because that concerns you and your evidence. Did you ever sign any of the contracts which form part of the advance payment system?
No, Chair.
Did you ever collate all these contracts and place them on the HSS system, the housing subsidy system?
No, Chair.
That's an electronic subsystem, is it not?
Yes.
And in fact, that system, which was picked up by the National Treasury or the National Department CFO to learn that advance payments were being made, is it not?
That's the system we're referring to.
And did you ever hand any contracts or invoices to the Financial Department for processing and payment?
No, Chair.
When did you become aware, as you say in paragraph 110, that despite the fact that these payments were made on this collection, to put it politely, of contracts, that materials were in fact never supplied by the time payments were made? What are you saying there?
Chair, as you move around and monitoring through your site meetings, sometimes you'll see that nothing is happening on site. But this contractor, when you look into the HSS, he has been paid. Material supply has been paid. You ask yourself, but how is it happening that there's no material, there's no construction on site? As we're sitting in the war room, we're monitoring everybody's performance. By simply taking a phone and calling that particular contractor to say, what's happening, are you on site? The contractor will tell you many stories. No, I haven't received the material, and the material supplier has got my money, and I'm still waiting. Mostly they were complaining, Korobrik hasn't come to us, and we are last on the list and stuff like that. Then you know that material has not been supplied, and payment has been advanced already.
You say this information came to the knowledge of the war room whilst the advance payment system was being put into place.
Yes, Chair.
So it must have been apparent to those officials, including senior officials and Mr. Zwane, that the system wasn't working.
It was, because there were reports generated by the war room.
But then why wasn't it stopped? I mean, you have a system, you're told it's illegal, you know it's illegal, you nevertheless, and I'm talking you in plural, not you personally, one has the system, one is told it's illegal, one begins to implement the system, one sees that the system is not working, you're paying money and no houses are being built because there's no delivery of materials. Why wasn't it stopped?
Because the MEC believed that it would work.
But he knew it wasn't working.
He knew it was not working because of the reports.
On that note, let's look at FS 14, if you would. Thank you for drawing this to our attention. Perhaps you should come join our team.
It will be my pleasure, I see.
You look at page 223. What is this document?
Let me get there first. At 223, you said?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, okay, of
FS
course.
14. What is this document?
It's a list of contractors and the allocations and the areas where the contractors were allocated.
All right, so there are two elements that are put into this document. One, the identity of the contractors who are going to receive contracts or who have received contracts, correct?
Correct?
As well as the number of units that they have been allocated to build.
Correct, Chair?
And of course, the areas from which they come.
Correct.
If you look at page 225, you'll see there a signature. Do you recognize that signature?
That's a signature of MEC Zwane.
Right, and it's dated the 10th of September 2010.
Correct, Chair.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's page 225 of bundle FS14. So that's the signature appearing next to the date 10/09/2010.
Correct, Chair.
That is Mr. Zwane's signature.
Correct, Chair.
Okay, and you know it well.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
Would you go to paragraph 116, please?
Paragraph or page?
Sorry, Chair. Back to bundle FS12,
Okay.
page 212.
Okay. Yes.
You have paragraph 116?
Yes, Chair.
You say in that paragraph, according to my recollection, the advance payment system was not stopped in February 2011 by Mr. Mokoena as accounting officer of the Department of Human Settlements, despite a meeting which he, the MEC, Mr. Zwane, the Chief Financial Officer of the Free State Province, and Mr. Tsoametsi had with the National Department. Let's begin with the meeting. What meeting are you referring to there?
It's the meeting between Minister Squale and the MEC and HOD and all those that are reflected there, the CFO and Mr. Tsoametsi.
And were you at that meeting?
I was not in that meeting.
How do you know what happened at that meeting?
Mr. Mokoena came and briefed us.
Right, what did he say to you?
Mr. Mokoena said Mr. Squale advised them that the scheme that they were implementing was unlawful and they must stop it.
Right. Now, Mr. Mokoena's evidence is that he, in fact, took steps to stop it. Do you know anything about that?
Chair, there should have been an instruction to the CFO, but I don't remember it.
All right. Do you know whether there was any instruction to the CFO in pursuance of this instruction given by the National Minister?
No, Chair.
Do you know whether payments continued?
Yes, Chair, I know because on the HSS system, they were still running those particular payments.
Well, did you see the evidence of the payments being made? Well, You say it was on the HSS system that payments were being made. What did you see on the HSS system? How did you come to learn of this, and what did you do about it?
I had the viewing rights of what is happening on the HSS. Then I will go and view and check what is happening on the HSS.
Well, do you know whether these payments were made to suppliers in advance?
Yes, Chair, I know that payments were made to the suppliers in advance. Because they will come knocking at my door and say, look, we are waiting for your contractors to come and collect their material. We've been paid.
So if one wanted to verify your evidence and understand whether the evidence of Mr. Mokoena and Mr. Makesi was correct, one could go to the HSS system and see the payments listed there.
Exactly, Chair.
And that would give one enough information to determine that these were indeed advance payment system payments being made after February 2011.
Yeah, they will be captured by dates.
Would it be an answer to say, well, these payments were made in terms of obligations which had arisen prior to February 2011 when we were just clearing out the system, but we entered into no new agreements after February?
Chair, that I will not say precisely. It was information was entered via the new contractual obligations because I mean money was spent prior, and there was a system overload. People, the information was still being captured as we move along.
Well, that may be a technical explanation for it, or computer-based information, or a data-based explanation. But I don't intend to suggest to you that when a decision is made to stop and an instruction is given to stop payments, that they shouldn't be stopped. The contracts were unlawful anyway. So there was no reason to continue paying just because an agreement had been signed before February. So I'm not suggesting it was, but there are two situations that could have arisen here. One, well, let me put it to you this way. The first is that these were merely the processing of payments agreed to before February, not excusable in our submissions to the chair eventually, but nevertheless an explanation, however unsatisfactory. The other is that even after February, new contracts were being entered into for advance payments. Do you know whether that happened?
Chair, that will be the point to be investigated, because if you capture something by the date, all the documents that you are capturing will have a reflective date when they were signed.
All right. Okay,
Yes.
so that information into which category it falls would be available on the HSS system.
Yeah, you'll have the HSS system reflecting the dates, then you'll go to those payment advices and the supporting documents to determine exactly when the documents were signed and submitted, because there will also be a stamp on them.
All right. Well, we will have to look at that. Thank you for that. I just want to put to you FS 12 at page 450, if you would go there, please. This is the statement of Mr. Bertus Venter, the legal advisor who lives on the 4th floor, as you mentioned. Correct.
FS 12?
Page 450.
450. Chair, I don't have, 450. My apology, Chair, I was looking at FS 14, sorry.
You could go to 450 of that bundle, please.
$450. I'm at 450.
Right, this is a page from the affidavit presented to the Commission by Mr. Fenter, who is a legal advisor in the Office of the Premier, Free State. Is that correct? Well,
I'm only seeing it now, Chair.
yes, well, you can accept what I'm saying. You can trust me on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm taking your word, SC.
Thank you. I want to put to you what's in paragraph 7. If you take issue with that, you can check whether that's actually his affidavit or not. But in paragraph 7 on page 450 of FS 12, Mr. Fenter says the following. He says, and I quote, "Neither me nor any of the other state law advisors in the Office of the Premier was involved in any of the processes when the initial transfer of money to building material suppliers took place. No one in the Office of the Premier provided a legal opinion on the issue of the initial transfer of the money to the building material suppliers, and we were never requested to do so. I have no idea why the state law advisors in the Office of the Premier was, I read as it is, was not involved by the Department of Human Settlements." Now, I understand it wouldn't have been your responsibility to make sure that this was done, but were you aware of a requirement that the Premier actually put in place, that contracts should actually be submitted to the Office of the Premier legal advisors?
Yes, Chair, I was aware. There was a letter written by the former DG of the Free State government, Dr. Noila, to all HODs, instructing them to go this route of bouncing all the contract legal documents with the state law advisors.
And if that directive was not obeyed, and deliberately not obeyed, it was a serious omission. You would agree with that?
Chair, as I've mentioned, in terms of my recollection, the lady that came from the state law advisors to come and testify during our disciplinary hearing came because we were questioning their involvement on all those legal instruments. They will not even have come to a disciplinary hearing if they were not involved.
Well, we can look at the transcript of the disciplinary hearing and make necessary submissions or deal with it in later evidence. But it's not matters directly within your knowledge, although it seriously affected the outcome of your disciplinary hearing.
Yes, Chair.
Is there anything else, Mr. Makatwa, that we have not dealt with that you would like to tell the Chair about in relation to the matters we've dealt with today?
Yes, Chair. If granted an opportunity, Chair, my first issue will be to call for your assistance in terms of finalization of our disciplinary hearing. This matter has taken toll on, I'm not saying on me alone. Sorry, Chair.
Yes, do you want to drink water?
Chair, when we begin this road 7 years ago, there were 6 of us. Selectively charged and failing. In the process of traveling this road, in trying to get justice, we lost one of our colleagues. Maybe when you read the transcript, you'll hear the name, you'll come across the name of Fifi Machaut. She unfortunately succumbed to depression and the pressures of this whole exercise of us getting purged by those that have powers to do so on our lives. Even today, as we sit, we're still getting that unfair treatment. Not to finalize this matter as speedily as we can so that we can move on with our lives. From my own experience, I have tried several times to get work. But the mere fact that there's this thing hanging on your career, you won't get anywhere. So, Chair, we are pleading with the Commission to, if the Commission can assist us. We are also pleading with the Commission, Chair, that necessary documents to exercise our rights be availed. I've mentioned when we started that we never had a clue of Open Waters report or preliminary report as purported in Mr. Mogesi's affidavit. Why were we charged? If he needed an answer to various questions that he had about anything in the department, we were there to explain to him. We will not even run away. I understand from his affidavit that we never came to assist him. The very same day he decided to suspend us, the Friday he gave us the letters, which gagged us not to talk to anyone unless he takes his phone or he writes to us to say, so-and-so will come and consult with you, give him a hearing. We were never contacted. He never even attended, as the person that believed that there were wrongdoings, he never even attended the disciplinary hearing. Junior officials were sent there to go and understand what is happening, who had no clue what was happening. Even during the road, we said, we are still here. Can we sit down and amicably settle this particular matter? Because now we realize, after 6 years down the line, that he has submitted his affidavit in trying to recover the money. And he clearly identifies who is responsible for design, approval of the system that was there. Which means, wait a bit, can't you see that we are not in the wrong? As to Mr. Mokoena, if you look at the transcript, what he said in his affidavit this week that was submitted to the commission is total contradiction of what he said during the disciplinary hearing. He totally denied the responsibility of the system. Whereas documents were there, he approved the implementation of the system, the memo. He also instructed and participated in the war room. As the chief, as the accounting officer of the department, he could not spread the accounting to all of us. We will be there to assist him, to point him in the right direction. No, this cannot be done, this cannot be done. But the responsibility to make a final decision rests with him in terms of all the legislative framework. Chair, I so wish that I could have came here with our matter having been solved, so that I can place all the documents and the decision reached by the forum that we are in now, which is the CCMA. This entire process has costed us, even our pensions are over now. We're owing our lawyers on the labor matter. We can't even move, Chair.
Are you represented by lawyers in your CCMA matter?
Yes.
What is the explanation they give you for the matter to take so long? The CCMA is an organization that is required to deal with disputes expeditiously, and you are supposed to refer your dismissal dispute to the CCMA within 30 days of your dismissal, because it's looked at as some matter that should be dealt with expeditiously. Now, if you talk about 6 years, 7 years, 8 years of such a matter not being finalized, especially when you talk of the matter not even having reached the stage of oral evidence, it seems just too long. Sometimes these matters can take as long as this in circumstances where there has been a trial, there has been an arbitration, but whoever has lost in the arbitration has taken the matter on review, and there are appeals to various courts. Sometimes the appeals go up to the Constitutional Court, so it can take a long time, a number of years, when it is that situation. But you said that the matter has not even reached a point where oral evidence has been laid, and that just makes the delay very, very long to me. What explanation do they give you, your own lawyers? Because they are supposed to know. They are the ones who are supposed to pressurize the CCMA to allocate the matter a date. What explanation do they give you when you say, what's holding things back?
Firstly, Chair, it was the appointment of commissioners. You'll get a commissioner appointed on a matter, but seeing the vastness of the evidence that he must deal with, he will then say, no, I'm not taking this particular case. Just on the brink of you hearing the matter, you going to sit down on the matter, there will be a requisal of the commission. I think we had, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 of such incidences. The last incident that we had, Chair, was when we reached an agreement with the employer party to say, now that you are reviewing the scheme, which you should have done and declared it unlawful before you charge us, can we wait for the matter to be finalized? And it took forever for the matter to be finalized. And then we came back and said, no, this is not working for us. Can we now go back to the system and say, let's continue? And then we continue. This one commissioner came there, it was during November, he says, your matter is too complicated. We asked him, look, take all the documents, the evidence that has been collected, because, I mean, going back to call again all the witnesses, taking 33 days or 50 days, is going to cost us money, and it's going to cost the employers money. Some of the witnesses are not even there. Ms. Debbie Hatting passed away, Ms. Fifi Mahausa passed away. So if we need to use those particular individuals, how are we going to cross the river? After 3 months, he came back and said, I want to hear the matter afresh.
Yeah, well, I suspect there may be a lot of things that may have happened which led to the matter being where it is now. Since you are represented by lawyers, I think that the first thing would be to get a proper explanation from the lawyers. Have they given you anything in writing that sets out exactly what has been happening over the past 7, 8 years, all the stages?
Yes, Chair.
There is such a document.
There is such a document.
Or have you got it here by any chance?
No, Chair.
It is at home.
It's at home. We can clearly avail it to the Commission.
Yeah, you see, if you are represented by lawyers, I'm not sure that the Commission could do much. But I leave that to Mr. Pretorius and his team. But again, it's not the job of the Commission, but it might not harm to find out what's happening. It's just
Certainly,
that when
Chair, the matter should be referred to the head office of the CCMA,
yes,
where arrangements can be made for special appointments.
yes, yes. For example, I would have expected that your lawyers, if they were unhappy with the provincial leadership of the CCMA in expediting the matter, I would have expected them to escalate your concerns to the national office of the CCMA. But I speak without knowing. Maybe they've done all of those things. So I think I'll leave the matter on the basis that you will talk to Mr. Pretorius and he will make his judgment call about what, if anything, the team can do about.
Yes, there is a second issue that may be relevant to the Commission's work, and that is whether there's any link between the officials in the Free State and the delays in the CCMA. It may be worth investigating as well.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say, Mr. Maklashwa, in regard to this matter is that it's quite concerning that a lot of money that had been set aside for the purposes of building houses for people seems to have ended up in the hands of various suppliers and maybe contractors. More than 500 million, I think I was told by Mr. Mokhetsi, and yet no houses were built in regard to that particular allocation for that financial year, 2010 to 2011. And the money should have benefited ordinary people. They should have got houses, but they didn't get any houses. And yet, government had set aside a huge amount of money. 1.3 billion rand. So it's very concerning because the government is there to ensure that the people get the services they need. Now, it's not just this matter where I'm hearing this kind of evidence, where a lot of money has been set aside for things to be done that would benefit people, but the money ends up with other people, and the people who are supposed to have benefited from that money, or what that money was to be used for, do not get anything. Within the context of the Free State, I had a few weeks ago evidence relating to what we have termed the asbestos project, where the documents that were issued by the Department of Human Settlements, same department, indicated that they were giving a contract to a certain joint venture in order to ultimately remove asbestos from the roofs of various houses because it's dangerous and so on. I had evidence that the job could have been done with about 21 million rand. But the provincial government gave this particular joint venture about 250 million rand for a 21 million rand job. On the evidence I've heard so far, there is very little, if any, work that the joint venture did. It just got subcontractors. Actually, the first subcontractor also didn't do any job. Only the third subcontractor did the job. The joint venture and the first subcontractor just pocketed the money. But to make it worse, there was no removal of asbestos from the roofs of the houses of people. There was simply the counting of houses that happened. Leave that aside. I've had evidence about what's been referred to as the Friede Dairy Farm, the Estina project that's well known. A project that was meant to benefit a lot of black farmers, people who wanted to do farming to earn a living. But there too, the people who were supposed to be beneficiaries to benefit from that project, I had evidence that they never got anything. And yet millions and millions of rands were paid out by the government, Free State provincial government. And that money ended in the hands of other people. And the real people who were supposed to benefit did not get anything. It's very concerning. This doesn't necessarily mean the Free State provincial government was the worst, because we haven't had evidence from other provinces and how other provincial governments fared. And we will not, because that kind of job needs years to do. So we will not know. But my own thinking is that if one went around the provinces, one would find a lot of projects where money that was supposed to benefit ordinary people ends up in the pockets of some people, and the ordinary people get nothing. It's very worrying. So I'm just mentioning that as I hear all of this evidence, here is something that troubles me quite a lot, because the people who are supposed to be taken care of end up receiving no benefits, and yet their money, because it's taxpayers' money, gets paid to other people. I guess, Mr. Muklashwa, you might not be able to say anything, and I'm not inviting you to say anything. I'm just saying that it's most frustrating to hear what I hear in this commission. And there seems to be no indications that it's slowing down. Instead, it looks like there are some people who say they don't care. They will also get their fair share out of corruption. We will call you if we need you again, Mr. Matlashwa. Thank you very much for coming to give evidence. You are now excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Pretorius, is that the end of the last of your witnesses for today?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
We resume, by your leave, 10 o'clock on Friday.
Okay, and who's your witness, or who are your witnesses on Friday?
Well, that's a matter still to be finally determined, but at the very least, Mr. Zwane will be present.
Yes, okay. Okay, we are going to adjourn for the day, and we will resume on Friday at 10 o'clock. We adjourn.
Thank you.
All rise.